What happens when a seasoned journalist decides she's done tiptoeing around royal privilege and calls out a prince on live television? You're about to find out, because what unfolded on The View was nothing short of explosive. The studio lights blazed as Megyn Kelly took her seat in the guest host chair, confidence radiating from her like a spotlight. She'd been invited to co-host a special episode on media accountability and public figures, but no one knew this segment was about to turn into one of the most uncomfortable interviews of Prince Harry's life. "Our next guest needs no introduction," Whoopi Goldberg announced, her tone carrying the faintest edge. "He's here to discuss his latest charitable initiative and his ongoing relationship with the media. Please welcome Prince Harry." The audience applauded as Harry walked onto the set, wearing that familiar, practiced smile. He took his seat across from the panel, appearing relaxed, until he met Kelly's eyes. She wasn't smiling. "Prince Harry, welcome to The View," she began, voice polite but cool. "It's interesting timing for your appearance, given your recent comments about media responsibility." Harry shifted in his seat. "Thank you for having me, Megyn. Yes, I think it's more important than ever to have these conversations about how the media operates and the impact it has on real people's lives." "Real people's lives," Kelly repeated, leaning in slightly. "That's fascinating, coming from someone who has made a career out of selling personal stories to the highest bidder. How do you reconcile advocating for privacy while simultaneously publishing tell-all books and giving explosive interviews?" The studio went silent. Joy Behar glanced down at her notes. Sarah Haynes darted her eyes between the two like she was watching a tennis match. Harry's smile faltered. "I think there's a difference between controlling your own narrative and having it controlled by others. When you've been lied about, when your family has been attacked, sometimes you have to set the record straight." "Set the record straight." Kelly's voice sharpened. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I sit, it looks more like a systematic campaign to damage your own family for profit. You've accused them of racism, of cutting you off financially, of refusing to protect your wife. Yet here you are, still using your royal title, still cashing in on the very institution you claim mistreated you." Harry's jaw tightened. "I think you're oversimplifying a very complex situation. The institution and the family are two different things." "Are they?" Kelly shot back. "Because you seem to merge them when it suits your narrative. Your grandmother, whom you say you loved deeply, was the head of that institution. Your father, now the king, is the head of that institution. So when you attack the monarchy, aren't you also attacking them personally?" "That's not fair," Harry said, his voice low. "You're twisting my words." "I'm quoting your words," Kelly replied evenly. "From your own book. From your interviews. You can't have it both ways, claiming to want privacy while giving interview after interview, claiming to protect your family while airing their private conversations, claiming to be a victim while living in a multi-million-dollar mansion with lucrative media deals." Whoopi raised a hand. "Megyn, let's give him a chance to—" "Oh, I want him to answer," Kelly cut in. "I want him to explain to the mothers watching, the single parents working 2 jobs, how someone born into unimaginable privilege can present himself as a victim of circumstance." Harry's face was now visibly tense. "You don't know what it was like growing up in that environment. You don't know what it's like to lose your mother to the same media you're defending. To watch your wife torn apart by that machine." "You're right," Kelly said. "I don't know what it's like to be born into royalty. But I do know what it's like to work for everything I have, without the safety net of a royal title." The audience was split. Some applauded, others shifted uncomfortably. Harry took a breath, his voice harder now. "You call it privilege, I call it a prison. You call it a title, I call it a target. Until you've lived it, you have no idea what it takes just to survive it." Kelly didn't flinch. "And yet here you are, on television, selling it again." The silence that followed was deafening. Cameras zoomed in on Harry's clenched jaw, Kelly's unwavering stare, and the other hosts frozen in place. Finally, Whoopi broke the tension. "Well, that was certainly a conversation worth having." Harry forced a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm sure the headlines will love it." Kelly leaned back, satisfied. "They always do, don't they?" And with that, the segment cut to commercial, leaving viewers across the country stunned, replaying the moment, and wondering if they'd just witnessed the end of Prince Harry's carefully managed media charm. "I know what it's like to face media scrutiny without a team of publicists or a multi-million-dollar platform to fight back," Megyn Kelly said, her voice cutting through the studio air like a blade. "And I know what accountability looks like." The audience was silent, every eye fixed on the table. Prince Harry scanned the panel, perhaps searching for a friendly face, but all he saw were uncomfortable stares. "Accountability," Harry repeated, leaning forward, his voice tightening. "Let's talk about that, Megyn. Let's talk about the media's accountability for my mother's death. For the racist coverage of my wife. For the lies and distortions printed about my family for decades." Kelly's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing her opening. "Your mother's death was a tragedy. No one disputes that. But using it as a shield for your own choices, for your own actions, that's not honoring her memory, Prince Harry. That's exploiting it. And as for your wife, she was a working actress who dated a prince and became a duchess. Media attention comes with that territory. You knew that. She knew that. She didn't deserve the treatment she received," Harry shot back, his voice low and tight with emotion. "No one deserves unfair treatment," Kelly agreed. "But life isn't fair. And instead of handling it with grace and dignity, like your grandmother did for 70 years, like your father is doing, like your brother continues to do, you chose to burn it all down. And now you want sympathy for the consequences of your own choices." Harry's hands clenched in his lap, his royal composure beginning to crumble. "You think you know everything, don't you? You sit here in your ivory tower, passing judgment on people you've never met, situations you've never lived." Kelly smirked. "Ivory tower? That's rich coming from someone who literally grew up in palaces. And yes, I do pass judgment. It's called journalism. I built my career. I didn't inherit it." "You have no idea what kind of pressure I was under," Harry snapped, his voice cracking. "The constant scrutiny. The impossible expectations. Watching my wife spiral into suicidal thoughts because of the relentless attacks." A ripple of gasps swept through the audience, but Kelly didn't flinch. "Those are serious allegations, and if true, they deserve compassion and mental health support. But wielding them as a weapon against your own family in public, that's not seeking help, Harry. That's seeking revenge." Joy Behar tried to step in. "Maybe we should shift to his charitable." "No, Joy," Kelly interrupted sharply. "This is exactly the problem, the softball treatment. Prince Harry came here to promote himself, while painting himself as a victim. The audience deserves the truth." Harry's eyes blazed. "You want the hard truth? The British press killed my mother, and they were trying to do the same thing to my wife. And my own family. They threw us to the wolves to protect themselves." Kelly leaned forward, her tone suddenly cold. "Your mother chose to get in that car. She chose not to wear a seatbelt. She chose to be with a man driving recklessly. Yes, the paparazzi were wrong to chase them, but personal responsibility exists, even in tragedy." Harry's face went pale, then flushed red. "How dare you blame my mother for her own death?" "I'm not blaming her," Kelly said evenly. "I'm saying tragedies are complex, and turning her memory into a political shield to justify your actions dishonors her more than any tabloid ever could." Whoopi tried again. "We should probably take a break." "No," Harry cut her off, his voice shaking. "I'm finishing this." He pointed across the table. "You think you're clever with your gotcha questions, but you're just another media parasite feeding on pain." Kelly's smile grew sharper. "There it is. The real Prince Harry, not the grieving son, not the protective husband. The entitled man who can't stand to be challenged. You want to know the difference between us? When I'm criticized, I don't run to write a book. I don't go on a global pity tour. I take responsibility." "You have no idea what you're talking about," Harry sputtered, his grip on the conversation slipping away. "Oh, I do," Kelly said, leaning back with quiet dominance. "I see a man who had everything, influence, a platform, a chance to make lasting change, and instead of rising to that challenge, you torched it all because you couldn't stand sharing the spotlight with your brother." The audience was frozen. Harry's jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. Kelly didn't blink. And when the cameras cut to commercial, no one moved, the tension still hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. "This has nothing to do with William," Harry protested, but the conviction wasn't there. "Everything has to do with William," Megyn Kelly pressed, her voice firm. "He's the heir. You're the spare. And you've never gotten over it. Your whole life has been shaped by that dynamic. And instead of finding your own place within it, you chose to burn the whole thing down. The book, the interviews, the complaints, they all come back to resentment. You resented your brother for being born first." Harry's chair scraped loudly as he stood. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "Actually, you do," Kelly replied, unflinching. "You booked this appearance. You came here to sell your version of events. But stories work both ways. And right now, the one being told is about a privileged man who can't handle criticism." "Harry, please sit," Sarah Haynes urged. "Let's keep this civil." "Civil?" Harry's voice sharpened. "There's nothing civil about what she's doing. This is an ambush, twisting my words, attacking my family." "I'm asking questions," Kelly said evenly. "The same ones millions are asking. If you can't answer without lashing out, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews at all." "You think this is lashing out? Standing up for my wife, my children, my mother's memory? I think hiding behind them while attacking everyone else is cowardly," Kelly shot back. "Trading on their pain for profit is despicable. And playing the victim when you've lived a life of privilege is pathetic." The studio was silent. Harry scanned the table for an ally. There was none. "You know what, Megyn?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You are everything that's wrong with modern media. Cruel, heartless, feeding off other people's pain." Kelly nodded slightly. "And you, Prince Harry, are everything that's wrong with modern celebrity culture. You want fame without responsibility, sympathy without accountability, to be seen as a victim while living like a king." Harry froze, emotions flickering across his face, rage, hurt, disbelief, before settling into something colder. He sat back down, deliberate, controlled. "You want to talk accountability? Fine. Let's talk about yours. How many lives have you ruined with your reporting? How many families have you torn apart for ratings?" "I report the truth," Kelly replied, but the confidence in her tone wavered. Harry's laugh was bitter. "You call it truth when you attack a grieving family? When you turn tragedy into entertainment? You talk about my mother like she was reckless, instead of a woman hunted every day by cameras, treated like a commodity." "Your mother was a grown woman who made choices," Kelly said, but softer now. "She was 36, Harry pressed, his voice gaining strength. "Trying to find happiness after a marriage crushed by an institution that cared more about image than people. She was stalked, harassed, commodified, until the night she died running from the very machine you represent. And when it happened, people like you turned it into a spectacle." Whoopi leaned forward. "Harry, we understand your pain." "Do you?" he cut in, turning his gaze on her. "Because Megyn here told a national audience my mother was responsible for her own death. She sat in that chair and reduced one of the most traumatic moments in modern royal history to a lesson in personal responsibility." "I didn't say she was responsible," Kelly replied quickly. "I said multiple factors were involved." "You said she chose to get in that car," Harry fired back. "You said she chose not to wear a seatbelt. You reduced her final moments to bad decisions instead of acknowledging she was running for her life." The audience leaned in, the momentum had shifted. "And you want to talk about my book, my interviews?" Harry continued. "At least I tell my own story. At least I speak for myself. You've built a career telling other people's stories, often without their permission, often without their consent." Kelly sat straighter, trying to regain control. "That's journalism. That's exploitation," Harry countered. "And here's the truth, Megyn. You're no different from the paparazzi who hounded my mother. You just hide behind a desk instead of a camera lens." Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but the director's voice called for a commercial break. The camera caught Harry leaning forward one last time, eyes locked on hers. "The difference between us? You need people's pain to make a living. I just want to survive mine." Joy Behar tried to cut the tension with a half-smile. "Well, that's what journalists do, Harry. Harry's head turned sharply. Is that what journalism is supposed to be? Because I was under the impression that journalism was about holding power accountable, speaking truth to authority. What I see now is a media machine that shields the powerful while turning the vulnerable into entertainment. And if you can't see the problem with that, then maybe you're part of it. Kelly straightened, seizing the opening. You're not vulnerable, Prince Harry. You're one of the most privileged people alive. Privilege doesn't protect you from pain, Harry shot back instantly. It doesn't shield you from loss. It doesn't stop you from watching the person you love contemplate ending her life because of the treatment she's receiving. You think money and titles make you immune to human suffering? They don't. They give you resources most people don't have, Kelly replied, though her voice carried less certainty than before. Resources. Harry's tone sharpened. What resources? A family that leaked stories about me to save themselves? An institution that threw my wife to the wolves? A press corps that turned our lives into a never-ending spectacle? Tell me, Kelly, what resource should I have used when my wife was receiving death threats? When she was being called names I can't even repeat on television? When she was compared to my mother in the cruelest, most dehumanizing ways? The room was frozen, every lens trained on him, every breath held. You want to know why I wrote that book, he continued, lowering his voice but not his intensity. Because for 38 years, other people have been writing my story. Deciding who I am. Deciding what I think, what I feel. Most of them without ever having met me or cared about me as a human being. Kelly tried to reclaim control. Surely you understand that public figures are subject to scrutiny. Scrutiny? Yes, Harry said firmly. But what happened to my wife? What happened to my mother? That wasn't scrutiny. That was harassment. That was abuse. And if you can't tell the difference, if you think it's acceptable because we were royal, then that says everything about you and the industry you represent. Sarah Ann's voice was soft but steady. Harry, I think a lot of people don't realize the human cost of fame. That's exactly right, Harry said, turning to her gratefully. Everyone sees the palaces, the titles, the ceremonies. They don't see the children crying because their father's being torn apart in the press. They don't see the sleepless nights, the security threats, the way every ordinary human moment becomes a potential scandal. Kelly gave one last push. But you chose to stay in the public eye. You could have stepped back quietly. Harry's expression hardened, but there was a flicker of pity in his eyes. Could I? Really? Because every time I tried, the media followed. Every time I sought privacy, you found new ways to intrude. The only choice you left me was to take control of my own narrative, or let you do it for me. So you chose profit, Kelly said, though the words landed weakly. I chose survival, Harry corrected. I chose to speak my truth before you could twist it beyond recognition. I chose to define myself before you could define me. And judging by your reaction today, that was the right choice. Whoopi stepped in, her tone decisive. I think we need to wrap this up. But Harry shook his head. No, Whoopi, let me finish. He turned back to Kelly. You came here today thinking you'd expose me, thinking you'd tear me down in front of your audience. But what you've done is expose yourself. You've shown the cruelty, the lack of empathy, the willingness to trade on other people's pain for entertainment. Harry rose to his feet, this time with dignity, not anger. I came here to talk about my charitable work, about causes I believe in, about making a positive difference. Instead, my family was attacked, my motives questioned, and my mother's death used as a weapon against me. If that's what journalism is now, maybe the problem isn't with the people being interviewed. He looked directly into the camera. To anyone watching who has ever felt attacked, dismissed, or misunderstood by the media, your pain is valid. Your story matters. And you have the right to tell it yourself. Turning back to the panel, he added, Thank you for having me, even if this wasn't the conversation any of us expected. Harry walked off set, leaving the studio wrapped in a stunned silence. Kelly sat motionless, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes unfocused. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to speak or let the moment hang. Finally, Whoopi's voice cut through. Well, that was certainly something. We'll be right back after this break. The cameras faded to black, but the weight of the exchange lingered, an unspoken acknowledgement that nobody, least of all Kelly, had expected Prince Harry to leave the set as the moral victor.